Yeah. Hey, everybody. Been a while since I've been around on the old YouTube channel. Um, 2, 3 weeks or more. I haven't done a lot of videos. Some people say, well, it's because I've been pretty busy. Well, I got some new tools in my busyness, which I want to share with you today with a lot of philosophical, intellectual tools that I'm always offering on my channel. Well, okay, so let's start with the real concrete materiality of where I am in my life right now. If you really care, I will share with you. Got a few new tools. We'll start here with the old. Okay, yeah, I love these things. Never had one in my life. It comes with a whole set of other tools to support it. Kind of like a big paint box for me, being a visual artist myself. I'm a tool artist. Well, putting together a lot of shelves that actually you can see as we move to Nanaimo, BC from Calgary, Alberta. Barbara and I haven't put up a lot of shelves in my downstairs office studio space. Um, Upstairs, I've put up a lot of shelves, and the house is sort of slowly that we're renting coming into some kind of semblance of order and possibilities. So, why we moved might be of some interest. A lot of reasons, but just seemed to be a lot of factors that came together that basically said, for Barbara especially to return to the West Coast, her family, her parents. I have some family here as well on the West Coast, and just things are in Calgary and Alberta generally. Interesting transition for us, 4 years being there after the Carbondale, Illinois venture, and Vancouver was before that. So in some sense, we're returning in the cycle back to Vancouver, even though most of Barbara and my life and career has been in Alberta. So this is the new West Coast adventure, and my guess is probably we'll be staying here more or less till my last days, and no real reason to move unless there's some particular exciting venture that may show up, and there may be for me to move elsewhere. So in the midst of packing and we're now deconstructing our lives um, and reconstructing them. It's like a month's worth of, of work and effort. It's an unbelievable energy that goes into it. Okay, that aside, I think I want to just kind of say that this is a very nurturing place, the West Coast so far. I've been here 2 weeks, and some really interesting projects are unfolding for me, particularly some with Barbara, some not. So I want to just briefly go over those projects so that you kind of know where I'm going with my work, and it'll reflect in my YouTube videos in the next while. Again, this kind of process of where I'm going. So unless you ask me or want me to, or ask questions about my work and things going on in the world that you'd like me to comment on in a YouTube, I'm always glad to consider those options, right? To do something that's relevant to what you want. But you got to speak up and let me know. So, off the top, let's just kind of go over. I've probably done 6 or 7 books in the last 4 or 5 years, and that's continuing. I now was adding up just this morning. I have 4 more books coming out. So things are intense in terms of just these projects, books, projects, particularly writing research projects, but more than just writing and research, as I'll explain in a minute. So let's just kind of go over a few of them so you can get a sense of how you might be interested or not to even stay on this channel, I suppose. But also to think about contributing and becoming a co-intelligence with me on this venture. So first book, um, after now finishing the Marianne Williamson one, I've got another one started with Barbara Bickle, my partner. And Routledge will be publishing this book. And it really is our intervention into the COVID-19 pandemic that started, over a year and a half ago or so. And immediately when we knew it was happening, we said, we need to do some kind of art practice, a community-based art practice that pulls people and creative practices together. I just intuitively knew it, and I kind of pushed for it. She, of course, was easy to convince. She loves to do spontaneous creation making, and we thought, well, let's invite people to do spontaneous creation making once a week or twice a week. And that's a whole other long story, which I won't go into here. But just to summarize, we had a group, international, all online, of course, with COVID and so on, that we just kept doing this spontaneous creation making. 2.5 hour sessions involved kind of a meditation process, a grounding processes. Place was important in sharing people's places, and it's interesting again to go into people's not just place of geography and history, which we also were interested in pulling out in the conversations as a group, as a community practice, communal practice, um, but also, their home. So you're getting a glance to see into people's homes as we're creative, artistic type peoples, interested in, forming a depth connection, right? A really intimate depth connection through use of the medium of visual creation making, which, for Barbara and I is our spiritual practice as much as anything. So that continued, and then we decided we really needed to do a book project and collate a lot of the data. We recorded the sessions, we collected data and surveys from the participants, and so we have a book going to be coming out, which is kind of, I think it's called Creative Practices for Caring Communities, something like that. Mm, At least, for now, that would be part of the title, at least spontaneous creation making, which is a technique Barbara and I have used. It's got art therapeutic aspects to it, but more than art therapy per se. And that will is a project that we started way back and wrote a book, first book in 1993 called Opening Doors, a guide to spontaneous creation making. So this will be kind of our second version of that book, that guide, that work. And we really are excited to share that with the world so that other people can utilize our book and understand some of the philosophy theory behind it, as well as the actual practices to do this work with others and build community, caring communities, and how to bring arts into community building processes, especially in times of high distress, right? Tragedy, suffering, potential for extinction, great terror, existential terror, anxiety that we're all facing more or less. The world is not the same. It is cascading and in a direction that's a little bit like this. Not that there won't be, you know, creative up spirals, but the general trend is one of a great reconciliation of humanity, as certainly in technological societies, and our confrontation with nature, our attempt to dominate it, which are badly failing and will fail, is my prediction, and many others. So we have an opportunity here to turn things around and or figure out how to go down the spiral with dignity, integrity, creativity, and keep as much of our best sides of our humanity together and intact as beings of this creation that is actually in some sense unraveling itself. You can say what the reasons might be to get rid of this virus that we've become, humans who think that we can be arrogant and ignorant to do whatever we want and get away with it. Haha, no. And nature will not allow that. Um, Mechanisms of whether it's a virus that comes and takes a lot of us down or other mechanisms that will come with global warming and pollution, basically. Our toxicity has gotten to a point it's out of control. All right, that's a project that will just keep going. Hopefully that book will be out, maybe in a year or so, if not sooner. And next project is a book that I put in a proposal for 6 or so months ago, and snatched a publisher. Information Age Publishing will publish a book on the fear problematique. It's subtitled something like um, really relooking at educational philosophy as a discipline within education studies, within philosophy as a branch, and the kind of revision that it really needs and how it's missed, in my view, this educational philosophy tradition in thinking a lot within academia and beyond. But I think it's really missed some really core bits and pieces, particularly in not understanding the fear problematic. And that's capital F, capital P. You know, in many of my videos, I've talked about the fear problem, capital F, capital P. I won't reproduce that here. Have a look at my other work and our writings. So that's going to come out and be a really interesting challenge for me to write within the field of educational philosophy. And yeah, you know, I am an educational philosopher. Um, by any other name, I am many things I can't even keep track of or remember what it is that I am. Oh yeah, label number 120, so of 7 or whatever. I have so many labels. And anyways, my biggest issue is not really interesting work to do or creative ideas or innovations in a kind of revolutionary projection of emancipation, liberation, all that good fearlessness stuff. But it's more how to make a living in this world that doesn't seem to want to work on a gift economy the way it ought to and the way it has for 99% of human history and the indigenous traditions. Well, I won't get into the gift economy, but the gift economy is obviously a project that Barbara and I are very interested in, and some others, and so you'll hear more about that, no doubt, at some points in my videos and or writings. It's always going to be an undercurrent. But in the terms of this exchange capitalist economy that seems to force us to live in at this point, we've bought into it, but it's also then tends to force us, and it's kind of a chain around our neck. Yeah, well, then it wants to kind of do us in as one of its slaves. So right now I'm working on a project. There'll be one other book as well called Something with Fear in Education, and that's I've met an educational philosopher in Israel, and he and I will be working on that. But I can't say more about that book. But definitely, education needs to talk and think about fear in a much more serious way and a much more new way than it has in the past. This first project and book, if you look back in my YouTube videos, FearTalk 13 with Howard Tyke, um, depth psychotherapist, kind of I call him a post Jungian, post depth psychology kind of guy, really pushing the edges in cosmic evolution and consciousness and the therapeutic or therapia, really, for cultural evolutionary healing, reconciliation, therapy, if you will. But I like the word therapy. He and I, Howard T. Kike, are getting together, and he's out of San Francisco. And he's got a lot of ideas. He's collecting a lot of interesting, really contemporary young digital artists, virtual reality type people, gamers, movie makers, who are looking at how to create a new curriculum. And his shtick, which you'll hear about in that video, I won't give it away here. FearTalk 13. Have a look at it. Just to say, he and I will definitely be continuing, and he's now pretty much given me some openings in his organization, Solar Lunar Arts, to direct and create with that team. So pretty exciting. I may even get some livelihood out of it. That would be really nice. And some next 4 or 5 years plus, I'm seeing some really interesting advanced headway in creating this revolutionary 21st century curriculum and pedagogy through new medias and so on, working in these directions toward some real rethinking of dehypnotizing, um, reverse brainwashing, if you will, perhaps all kinds of learning, right? Transformative learning, not just learning. We're going somewhere. We need to go somewhere. We need to make huge changes on this planet about our very identity. So, the last part of this theme, and really, I'm not going to say a lot about it in this video, but it is the theme that I think is right up for me in encountering his work in the last few years, and he's watched my work in the last few years, and we're both co-friends of Four Arrows, I've written and done a book on, as well as several videos on an Indigenous scholar, Four Arrows, Dr. Don Jacobs. But where we're going is kind of what you could call kind of a trans happening or a trans evolution of very human identity complex. And I mean that in a good way, complex, um, and of how we see ourselves. Obviously, we're not the first to examine and explore new ways to see ourselves, but we have some pretty interesting projections and trajectories and theoretical frames for identifying ourselves as more cosmic beings. And I'm not just talking some kind of new age spiritual thing, esoteric here. As you'll see as this unfolds, as these projects, the transhuman happenings, as I'm kind of framing for me anyway, as an artist, and thinker, philosopher. Now, these trans happenings are going to more and more move us to, I'm talking about humans who are open and willing to really identifying, certainly beyond cultural identities, the ethnocentric and racial identities, the sexual, gendered, sexual orientation identities, age identities, etc., to what you could call, or more as a depth soul archetypal identities in patterns of formations. And this is like a new medium, right? This is like the new intellectual, aesthetic, philosophical tools that I'm going to be playing with in the next while more and more. I've always been interested in them for a long time. And I just feel like the things are really coming together to really work these tools, beyond this. So keep you informed on that. You can certainly ask questions, watch what I'm doing. Let's stay in touch. And this trans cosmic movement of our identities will be, at least it's a theoretical solution to the kind of stuckness that we're getting into in the bipolarization, right? The extreme polarizations, dichotomies, binaries, dualisms, dissociations, distancing of the other, and forming these, we're better because we're this color, we're better because we're this race, we're better because we're this status, we're better because we have this identification, and you've been the problem and you're the victim, you're the oppressor, in the cycling around of identity structures of thinking, the kind of consciousness that frames all of those problems. And it's definitely political and it's definitely important. Neither Howard T. Pike or myself are poo-pooing these realities of what we're struggling with in terms of identity politics, to be blunt. And we're just saying, I'm definitely not going to be the answer within those discourses, those ways of thinking. And that's really what us creative folks who want to pursue this, and everybody's invited. We need to be way, way more creative than falling back in categories and traditions and preservations of, traditions and so on. Not that there aren't important aspects to traditions. Don't get me into that, camp as somehow I'm anti that. No, not anti. I'm just interested in including the best of that kind of thinking and identities and traditions into then a real evolutionary movement, and that's really where Howard and I and others are going. Call us evolutionaries, call us whatever you will. All labels of not that much importance until you get down to the nitty gritty. So, love and fear, my thing, right? As a fearologist, will be involved in some of the Howard's work with his twin depth psychology um, work that he's done. Really interesting work. So we'll all keep in touch if you want to. And again, I've given you references to some other videos and other places you can go to have a look at Howard's work, as well as for Arrows, as well as Barbara's, etc. We're all, it's kind of a collective here in a very loose form happening. And again, you, no matter who you are, what you are, if you're an educator and you're interested in the future of education, well, holy, this is a place where I think some real tools can be got for you as an educator, as a thinker, of theorist, and then right down to classroom. So that's one of the big projects is uh, Howard and I and others are envisioning, various schools for everything from adults to down to children, of course, and for families and so on. Where's the new education for the 21st century going to happen that's going to allow and build um, some real solidity of base during these incredible crisis times, but also to move that energies, right, the destructive energies, as best as possible. Nothing's perfect, into good evolutionary directions that will move us to this trans happening of a much more healthy, sustainable um, world. Okay, that's a little bit in touchness. Glad you could join me from my basement studio.